Hey guys, welcome to the video on Chapter 5, Lesson number 1. Today, guys, is going to be a pretty big lesson from Chapter 5. There's a lot of content to cover in here, so I'm going to break it into two parts to make it a lot easier to understand. I have three goals for you guys, and the first goal is actually going to take a couple of chapters for you guys to fully understand. So don't feel bad if you don't fully get it in this lesson, because we'll have future lessons to cover it. So, first off, students will know the role of mitochondria in making energy for the body. Really, today, all I want you guys to know is what the mitochondria are and kind of where they're located. Two, students will know the role of the cytoskeleton in giving the cell shape. So you're going to know how the cell has its shape and what the cytoskeleton is. And number three, students will know the purpose of the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi apparatus in secreting proteins. So, with that being said, this is going to be, like I said, it's going to be a very long lesson. It's going to have two different videos to cover everything in this chapter. So, as part of my goal for this chapter, I'm going to have you guys create a C map with each of the organelles listed on it. This lesson is going to cover the first half of the organelles, and the next lesson will cover the other half. So you want to make sure that you save the C map you're going to create at the end of this lesson, because you're going to be using it again for the next lesson as well. Now, descriptions of the organelles can be found in the picture and in your book. So if you need some more help with it, feel free to look at the book, because this is one of those areas, it's a lot of memorization, and really, guys, that's all it is here. Is memorization and kind of seeing how the cell works. So, here essentially is a picture of the cell. There's three of them here: an animal, a plant, and a prokaryotic cell. The prokaryote being a bacteria. Now, this picture right here shows you the location of all the various organelles and where they're located at. Now, what I've done here, guys, and here how this is going to work, is I'm going to point out the location of the organelle, and I'm going to explain to you guys what it does. Now, on the PowerPoint, though, I've actually given you guys descriptions of what each of the organelles does. So you'll be able to look on the PowerPoint to get a better idea of what the organelle does and see how it works. So, the very first organelle I want to cover for this particular lesson is called the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is basically this goo stuff that's in between all the various organelles. So you see cytoplasm is here, cytoplasm is this part in between here, and it's the part it's in between here. The cytoplasm is basically kind of a gooey-like substance that makes up the cell. It has water, it has other types of solutes. Solutes being things like sugars, proteins, and other stuff like that are floating around inside of it. Think of it as the goo that is the in-between inside of the cell. The second part is called the cytoskeleton. Now, the cytoskeleton, unfortunately, isn't really shown very well on this picture, but it's mainly because it's basically the entire cell, to a large extent, is made up of the cytoskeleton. It's done a job right here showing some microtubules, which are these little tiny lines that come out. These are probably microtubules here, here, and here. Now, the cytoskeleton is broken into two, has one goal. It basically holds the cell together, and it acts as transportation lanes, basically roads for the cell to move around. There's two main components of the cytoskeleton. The first one is the microtubule, like you can see right here. It has one goal. Microtubules are the roads of the cell. There are proteins, they're called transport proteins that can walk. Literally, they walk. It's really cool. If you watch the video I showed you guys last lesson, that walk up and down these microtubules, and they're basically roads. The second one, which is not pictured in any of these pictures, unfortunately, because it's too small to even see by these standards, is called the microfilament. The microfilament is basically the supporting beams. They're like the concrete that hold the cell together. They act as little lines between the cell to give the cell its shape. That way the cell actually just doesn't squish down thanks to gravity. They hold the cell together. So the cytoskeleton is made up of two parts. There's the microtubules, which are the roads of the cell, and there's the microfilaments, which are basically the structural supports. They're the blocks of the cell that keep to hold it together. The third thing I wanted to talk about is called the ribosomes. Now, the ribosomes are very hard to see on this picture again because they're a very, very small component of the cell, but they're extremely important. The ribosomes make proteins. That is their one job. They are basically protein factories. They take information sent out from the nucleus and they turn that information into proteins. And that is their one job. There are lots of them inside of your cells. And they're mostly located along this structure right here, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, which is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum. But they also can be found just sort of floating around here in the cytoplasm as well. But just remember, ribosomes are made for creating proteins. Now, the book doesn't put this one in there, but I feel like it's important for you guys to know it and to understand its relationship between the two. It's the idea of the nucleus. The nucleus is the part where the DNA is held. And you probably know that because we covered it in Chapter 7, Section 1, but I want to do a quick review of it here. The nucleus is just a membrane-bound part of the cell that stores the DNA. That's all it is. Now, if you look at these pictures closely in the animal and the plant cell, you'll see something that inside the nucleus, there's this other circle here called the nucleolus. The nucleolus has one job. Its goal is to make ribosomes. So DNA is stored here, but the nucleolus is actually creating ribosomes. And that ribosomes are actually going to leave via these nuclear pores right here. So the ribosomes you see floating around inside the cytoplasm and inside of this endoplasmic reticulum, which I'll talk about here in a minute, are all being made here in the nucleolus. Now, there's two more structures left I want to talk about. The next one is called the endoplasmic reticulum. That is this structure right here on these cells. The endoplasmic reticulum comes in two varieties and sort of has two jobs as a result. The first thing it does is here what's called the rough endoplasmic reticulum. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is the part closest to the nucleus, and if you look at it under a microscope, and there's an awesome picture in your book you should look at if you want to get a better idea of what this looks like, is that it has just thousands and thousands of little dots inside of it, which is where it gets that rough name from, because you have all those small dots in there. These dots are all ribosomes. And you might be able to figure out thinking, oh, okay, so if there's a whole bunch of ribosomes in here, it's connected to the nucleus. Well, what's the job of what's the job of the rough endoplasmic reticulum? Well, it's simple. It's the part where proteins are basically made. It's the focal point for that, is that the nucleus is going to send out RNA into this area where the RNA will be used by the ribosomes to make proteins. And most of that occurs right here in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now, as you move out of the endoplasmic reticulum, you get into what's called the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And this really seems only have a job in certain cells, like white blood cells, and that is it deals with waste extraction. I don't quite know how that works, and it might be a cool project that somebody might want to take on later to help maybe, see how things work, maybe earn some extra points on that. But this is called the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and its job is mostly in kind of cleaning out the cell and managing things like that. Now, there's one important thing to understand about the endoplasmic reticulum. If you look carefully, it's kind of squished in and folded. You can see a whole bunch of folds inside of the endoplasmic reticulum. That folding lets it have more surface area for ribosomes to attach to. And what that basically means is that the more folding that your endoplasmic reticulum has, the more ribosomes and things like that it can store. I hope that makes sense. The last structure I'm going to talk about today, guys, is called the Golgi apparatus. That's this weird gooey looking thing right here. The Golgi apparatus has one job. It's basically the bus station of the cell. It's going to send out and transport things around the cell. And oftentimes the microtubules, which you see up here, are attached to parts of the Golgi apparatus. And the Golgi apparatus creates these little circular balls that we call vesicles. And these vesicles get moved around via the microtubules and either get moved to different parts of the cell, so they might get moved to the mitochondria, they might get moved over to the lysosome, or they might get moved outside of the cell to someplace else. The Golgi apparatus is basically a bus station inside the cell. It's going to be creating these vesicles, which are like the buses, and they're going to send them out different parts of the cell. And that's everything I want you guys to know from the first lesson in lesson number 5. So here's what I want you guys to do today. I want you guys to create a concept map using a CMap. Now we did this way back in the very first part of the semester, in the very first semester. So most of you guys should have this installed. If you don't, you're going to need to go get it. And what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to create a CMap that shows what organelles are and what they are in the body. So I want you to explain what they do and add any extra information about those organelles. Now I have an example on this slider here. Let's just see kind of what I'm looking for. I created my own partial CMap. So yeah, here in the middle I have the word the cell. It contains a cytoskeleton, which is one of the key terms I covered today. It has two purposes. The first purpose is it helps to move things around the cell, which is done by microfilaments. Its second purpose is it holds the cell together, which is accomplished by microtubules. I want you guys to create something like this, and you guys can copy this one right here. I've already given you the cytoskeleton, so you can go ahead and copy this one here. And I want you to do that for every single organelle that I covered today. Remember, if you don't remember what the organelles do, you can check the PowerPoint. It gives you some notes you can be working on. And that's it. I want you guys to work on that. Make sure to save it. You will be using it for the next lesson. And make sure you keep some space because we're going to be adding an additional, I believe, 7 organelles. So you're going to need to have a lot of space on this. So make sure that you have plenty of it available. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and good luck.